All right, folks, we are back with the Wild Robot Escapes. We left off in chapter 27. Roz had just come down out of the tornado. Chapter 28, The Shop. It was a small, sleepy farm town. A few trucks glided down the streets. A few humans sat on porches. A few stores lined the main square. Rambler parked in front of a bright white building. Then Mr. Sharif left the children with Roz, and he limped inside. "Welcome to the Tech Lab shop," said a woman in a white suit. "My name's Nadine. How can I help you?" Mr. Sharif was distracted by all the robots on display in the shop. They came in a dazzling variety of designs and sizes and colors. Standing still, eyes glowing, they calmly waited for someone to put them to work. When the man spotted a Rosum unit, he suddenly remembered why he was there. "I am the owner of Hilltop Farm," he said, "and we were just hit by a tornado." "I heard the siren," said Nadine. "Is everyone okay?" "My family's okay, but I've got a Rosum unit outside who's in bad shape." The woman called over her shoulder, "Patch, bring the Rosum repair kit." A robot marched into the room carrying a large case. He looked similar to a Rosum unit, but he was shorter and wider. The word Patch was lightly etched on his torso. Mr. Sharif led Nadine and Patch out to the truck, where the children were chatting with their robotic friend. Patch quickly scanned Roz's broken body and announced the cost of the repairs. The man stroked his chin, mulling over his options until the children blurted out, "Just fix her!" Mr. Sharif nodded and Patch sprang into action. With smooth, precise movements, the robot gently placed Roz on the ground. Then he grasped her broken arm and her broken leg and twisted. There was the thwip sound as each limb popped loose. Then he took new limbs from the case and thwip popped them into place. In a matter of seconds, Roz was whole and back on her feet. "Robots never cease to amaze me," said Mr. Sharif, admiring Roz's shiny new limbs. "The makers really outdid themselves with these Rosum units," said Nadine. "However, you have our most basic unit. Would you like us to upgrade her software or adjust her settings or polish out these scratches?" "Will that cost extra?" Nadine smiled. "I'm afraid so." "The basic unit is fine," said Mr. Sharif, "but I need to order a work crew. Could you send one over to fix up my farm?" "Not a problem," said Nadine. "I'll send a crew over immediately." Chapter 29, The Aftermath. Hilltop Farm was hardly recognizable. Buildings were flattened, equipment was missing, debris was everywhere. The farm had no electricity, and the computer system was down. As Roz picked her way through the rubble, she realized she was off the grid. It would be hours before Mr. Sharif could track her electronic signal again. Was this the moment for her escape? No, Roz couldn't leave the Sharifs, not like this. Instead, she did what she could to help. The tornado had left behind a winding trail of destruction. Thankfully, it hadn't destroyed everything. The barn was leaning to one side, but it was still standing. Roz forced open the door and found the cows nervously bunched together in the corner. "You are all safe now," said Roz in her calmest voice. "How is everyone feeling?" The robot was answered by a chorus of moos. "How do you think we feel?" "I'm a nervous wreck. My whole life flashed before my eyes." The robot raised her hands to quiet the crowd. "I am afraid the tornado destroyed much of the farm, including the milking parlor." The cows gasped. "But my udders are about to burst," cried Tess. "Would you like me to milk you the old-fashioned way?" said Roz. One look at the robot's clamping mechanical hands, and Tess shook her head. "No thanks, I can wait." "An emergency crew is on its way," Roz explained, "but we cannot be in here while they work. Please follow me." Roz carefully led the herd outside, through the wreckage, and down to the pasture. Some of the fences were missing and the herding machine was broken, but the cows promised not to wander off, and they began grazing on the wind-blown grass. 3 massive trucks rumbled up the driveway. Doors swung open and a crew of robot workers climbed out. The lead robot checked in with Roz as the others began unloading supplies from the trucks. Then the crew got down to business. Power tools buzzed, debris was cleared, fences were mended, holes were dug, machines were repaired or replaced, beams and walls and roofs went up, equipment and pipes and wires were installed. Clearly, these robots were designed to work as a team. The Sharifs wandered out back and stood with Roz. They watched as their farm was rebuilt before their very eyes. Several crew members marched over to the house, fixed a hole in the roof, and replaced the shattered windows. Finally, rubble and tools were loaded into the trucks and the robots fell in line. "Are you satisfied with our work?" said the crew leader. "I am satisfied," said Roz. At those words, the robots climbed back into their trucks and drove away. Hours after it had been devastated by a tornado, Hilltop Farm was better than ever. Chapter 30. The Gift. The children walked into the machine shed, past rows of parked farm machines, and found Roz tuning up the milk truck. "We got a gift for you," said Jad, smiling. The robot felt something like surprise when the boy handed her a box wrapped in silver paper with a big red bow on top. "Can you guess what it is?" Roz started guessing. "A bucket? A rock? A hammer? A turtle? A can of..." Okay, you can stop guessing," said Jaya. "Don't forget to read the card," said Jad. Nestled under the bow was a little card. Roz opened it and read the following words. They were written in Jad's messy handwriting. "Dear Roz, thank you for taking such good care of our farm and our family. We spent all our savings on this gift, so you better like it. Love, Jaya and Jad. P.S. Please tell us more stories about the robot on the island as soon as possible." "Thank you for that nice card," said Roz, although the handwriting could use some improvement. Jad rolled his eyes and said, "Open your gift." The robot untied the bow and tore off the paper and lifted the lid from the box. Inside was a tool belt. It was made of dark leather and had a wide strap and different sized pockets for holding different kinds of tools. "We thought this might make your work a little easier," said Jaya. "It's designed specifically for Rosum robots," said Jad, "so it should fit perfectly." The children helped Roz put on her new tool belt. Rather than going around the robot's waist like a normal belt, it went diagonally across her torso. Jad looped it over Roz's left shoulder and down around her right hip. Jaya laced the strap through the buckle and tightened it until the tool belt was snug and secure across her chest. "Do you like it?" said Jaya. "I like it very much," said Roz. "Thank you for this lovely gift." The children smiled and hugged the robot. They really seemed to care about her. Roz wondered if they cared enough to help her escape from the farm. One of these days she would have to risk everything to tell them the truth. For now, however, she did the next best thing. She led Jaya and Jad out to the oak tree and told them another story about the robot on the island. Chapter 31. The Campfire. Wood smoke billowed up from the backyard and drifted across the farm. Roz was building a campfire for the Sharifs. In her old life, the robot made fire by cracking special stones together until she got a spark. In her new life, she used a lighter. The family sat around the rippling flames and gazed up at the stars. The dog stretched out on the warm ground. The robot was standing nearby, but her thoughts were far away. Her computer brain was scrolling back through the memories of campfires and of stargazing with Brightbill. Fluffy white marshmallows were skewered onto the ends of sticks and then roasted above the flames. The children laughed as their marshmallows caught fire. They liked them charred on the outside and gooey on the inside. Their father preferred his evenly browned. When the Sharifs weren't stuffing their mouths, they were chattering happily. "That's the space station," said Jaya, pointing to a tiny dot that was slowly moving through the sky. "I can't believe people live there." "Animals live there too," said Jad. "The station has a farm. We should bring our cows up and show those space farmers how it's done." "I think our cows are perfectly content right here on Earth," said Mr. Sharif, "and so am I." Once the marshmallows were gone, Jaya and Jad snuggled up with Oscar, stared into the flames, and asked their father about the old days. But the children were just too cozy to stay awake for long, so Mr. Sharif spoke to Roz instead. "We made campfires all the time when I was a boy." The man poked the coals with his marshmallow stick, and glowing embers floated into the air. "The whole family would sit around like this, telling stories. We had a nice life here. But then my brother and sister moved to the city. My parents got old and everyone expected me to take over the farm. I couldn't run this place by myself," he went on, "so I hired Jamila. I did the farm work and she managed the business. We made a good team and then we fell in love. When Jamila was pregnant with Jad, we bought a few auto machines to help out. Then Jaya showed up and we bought a few more. If I had known one of those machines would be the death of her." The farmer's voice trailed off. Roz wanted to know more about Jamila and about Mr. Sharif and about the rest of the family. But a normal robot wouldn't ask personal questions, so she kept her questions to herself and dropped another log onto the fire. Chapter 32, The Old Barn. Long ago, Hilltop Farm was a very different place. The original farmers grew vegetable gardens and fruit orchards, and they raised chickens and sheep and goats. The farm had changed a lot since then, but there were still signs of its past. Low stone walls lined some of the fields. A rusty tractor sat in the weeds, and hidden within a densely wooded grove was the old barn. The barn hadn't been used in generations. Over the years, trees had quietly grown up around it, and moss had spread across its roof. But the barn was still strong and solid, and Roz wanted to take a look inside. The big barn door screeched along its rails. "Hello?" said Roz, peering into the darkness. "Is anyone in here?" A mouse squeaked and scurried out of sight. Then Roz had the barn to herself. She stepped through the doorway and switched on her headlights. The vast interior was crisscrossed with thick wooden beams. Stairways and ramps led up to lofts and platforms. Lanterns hung from hooks on the walls. Old-fashioned farm equipment lay here and there. The barn still had the faint smell of farm animals, even though none had lived there in ages. A large trunk sat on a work table covered in dust. Roz carefully opened the lid and examined its contents. A collection of farming magazines, a pair of leather gloves, a pencil nub, and then she noticed a small journal. The name Cyrus Sharif was elegantly scrawled across its cover. The pages were filled with his handwritten notes and hand-drawn diagrams about raising livestock and growing crops and building barns, about working the land with the help of strong animals and simple machines. Cyrus Sharif had also jotted down his thoughts about the long history of farming. He believed that the modern world owed its entire existence to ancient farms, when early humans first started growing their food. Those farms were small and primitive, but they supported villages which became towns, which became cities. The writings were so wise and insightful that Roz read the journal from cover to cover. By the end, she almost felt as if she knew Cyrus Sharif, whoever he was. The journal was a treasure, and she tucked it into a pocket of her tool belt for safekeeping. Chapter 33, The Autumn. Autumn colors were sweeping across farm country. The lush greens of summer faded to reds and browns. Crops were harvested, leaves fell away, and the landscape turned stark and gray. On Hilltop Farm, the cows were grazing on what remained of the pasture grass, while the herding machine hovered nearby. The field machine was preparing the fields for winter. The drone circled the farm several times a day, but there was less to report in autumn. Although Jaya and Jad were busy with school, they always made time for Roz. The children never grew tired of listening to the robots' stories, and they never grew tired of sharing their own. The bees and the mice and the deer and the frogs and the raccoons and the squirrels and the snakes were all getting ready for cold weather. So too were the birds. The owls spruced up their nests. The crows stockpiled acorns. The swallows were still swooping over the farmland, but they would soon be leaving for winter. And any day now, other migratory birds would begin passing through on their long journeys to the south. Chapter 34, The Delighted Geese. A flock of geese had just landed at Hilltop Farm. It was the first flock of the autumn migration. The geese floated on the pond, cleaning their feathers and nibbling on weeds, but they all stopped what they were doing when Roz waved and said hello. The robot never forgot a face, and she was certain she didn't know any of these geese, but they seemed to know her. Before she even introduced herself, the lead goose squawked, "Is your name Roz?" The Roz stared at the goose. "Yes, it is." "And you can speak the animal language?" The answer was obvious, but Roz politely said, "Yes, I can speak the animal language." "Do you by any chance have a goose for a son?" "Yes, I do," said Roz. "His name is Brightbill." At that, a voice blurted out, "The stories are true!" And suddenly the flock was smiling and fluttering over to the robot. When the commotion settled down, the leader explained, "All along our migration, we've heard rumors of a robot who can speak with the animals. who has a goose for a son and who is trapped on a farm. That sounded ridiculous to us, but here you are. The flock was absolutely delighted to meet our robot. They lounged around the pond for a couple of days, chatting with Roz whenever she came by, and then they continued flying south to their wintering grounds. Another flock of geese arrived, and the same thing happened all over again. Roz welcomed them. They were delighted to meet the legendary robot, and then the flock continued south. Then it happened again and again. Before long, the coming and going of delighted geese was just another part of the robot's autumn routine. Straggling behind the others, as usual, was Wingtip's flock. When Roz saw them splashing onto the pond, she felt something like hope that they might have news of her son. Sadly, the geese had no news to report, and as the flock took off and left Roz behind, she began to question whether she'd ever see Brightville again. Chapter 35, The Memories. Roz still dreamed of escaping, of going home, of reuniting with her son, but her dreams were starting to feel impossible. She was losing hope. Was it time for the robot to accept her new life and forget the old one? Forget. Roz was troubled by that word. You see, her computer brain remembered every detail of her life on the island, and it hurt to think that she might never make it back there. However, the robot could always forget. She could erase her old memories. It would be like they never happened. The heaviness she now felt would vanish, but without her memories, who would she be? No, Roz wanted to remember her old life, which was good because someone from her old life was about to appear.